Welcome to my channel, Life by Shauna. If you haven't subscribed, press the button, do it. Don't be surprised, it's still me. I took off 24 years of having it long and it's short. I had hair short for about 1 year, 24 years ago. And anyways, I'm doing it again for an undetermined amount of time. So, it's a new year. And I thought a lot of times I like to wrap up the year with a video, but I didn't at the end of the year, so I'm coming in about a month late. But, you know, I thought it would be great to just talk about the year, talk about a new year coming in. It's like a fresh start. A new year is a fresh start. People make New Year's resolutions. I do not. Although it is, for me, a great time to kind of reflect on the year. What could I do differently this year? How can I improve things? And so I'm going to be talking about that. And I'd love to hear what some of you guys are doing to improve your life. So sorry about my plant, just, you know, he's sad right here. I'm not on my A game right now with my plants, some of my plants. Anyways, so I was also wanted to share, of course, what the Lord's doing. This next year is going to be, I feel like, a wild year for us. So stay tuned. Part of my, not saying New Year's resolutions, but life habits I want to integrate as well as a few goals I have. But one of them, a goal would be to make a video at least once a month because sometimes I go like 6 months. So at least I think I did one time last year. So anyways, so let's just get into it. Last year, if I had someone at the beginning of the year who was going to say a prophetic word, let's say, over what my year was going to be. It would have been restoration. And I had no idea. It's so wild. You go into a year and you have no clue how life is going to change. And this year has been a year of restoration for me. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Well, I'll just talk about it right now. All of my kids, my grown kids who have gotten married and moved away, they have all moved back to where I am. And that is amazing, you guys. You know, if you think about like being a mom and, you know, I wanted to homeschool. I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. My mom was. I think that's super valuable to raising kids and creating the type of home that I wanted. And it's like you put in all this effort and all this work and sacrifice because, you know, when you're a stay-at-home mom, you know, you're relying on one income as well as then when you homeschool, it's a lot of work and it's not always, it doesn't always feel rewarding in the moment. Of course, as the years go by and you look back, you're like, that was really good. I'm glad I did that. But so you sow all this part of your life into your kids. And then when they grow up, and as you guys know, if you've been following along, my life went to hell in a handbasket, but really it was the Lord's doing. Sometimes to break up the foundation, you got to have a tornado. You know, you got to make a new foundation. And so, not talking about foundation of the Lord, of course. And so, anyways, but you know, you put in all this work. My life went crazy, and all of my older kids were like, we are gonna get away from Missouri. Like every place is better than Missouri. I had a kid in Texas, a kid in Arkansas, a kid in Florida. Like that is so far away. And, and then kids start having kids. And I'm like, I'm not going to have much of a relationship with my kids if I only get to see each kid a couple times a year. Like, that is very sad. And I wouldn't be involved in the grandkids' lives. And so to see, it's like they all moved away. And I get it, because for several years, I didn't have a whole lot to offer. I was just treading water to keep my head above water, treading water to keep my head afloat, yeah. And then to see like my life getting settled, good things are happening. Hey, like all the cool stuff and fun stuff that my kids grew up, like our family life is back. It's a little different now, but it's back in a lot of ways. And my kids decided to all move back. And so that has been amazing. Like, to have such a large family and to have everyone here in town, it's amazing. So that was one part of restoration. Another part of restoration was, one of my kids had to have a car this year. And make a long story short, because I'm not going to go into it, guys, I got a convertible. My daughter got my old car, and we're not into, like, I'm not super into cars. Like, I like certain things, but it doesn't have to be fancy. And we were deciding, like, do we get her a car? Do we get me a car instead and her take mine, whatever? And I'm like, let's have her take mine and I get a convertible. And because I don't like to have to spend a bunch of money on a car, I'm like, it needs to be a Toyota. And so we found a great deal on a Toyota convertible, Solera. Within a couple months right before that, I had always wanted a farm truck, like an old beater farm truck. And for whatever reason, I guess because everything's more expensive, beater farm trucks have gotten expensive, you guys. Like, rust, old, they're expensive. And it's like, why? And we found one. And so, like, I had always said, like, my two cars that I want to have someday is I want a beater truck and I want a convertible. Like, it doesn't have to be fancy. And so for less than $10,000, we got my two vehicles that I've always wanted. So I used to have a convertible. I've had a couple convertibles over my life, and they are my favorite car to drive. And so that felt like restoration. Like, we had to go a couple hours down the road to get the convertible, and I'm driving it on the way home. The top is down. The weather was amazing. I got my tunes on. But most of the time I just had it quiet, and I was just like thanking the Lord and absorbing, like, oh my gosh, like, I got a convertible again. Like, it's a big deal to me. It's a big deal. I'm super into convertibles. So it's just something about, like, the wind blowing through your hair, and you just feel like it turns everyday driving into an experience and a joyride. So that happened this year. Another thing that happened, and for those of you who've been part of my life in the past, one thing that was pretty meaningful to me in my past life was I had a 10-foot table. I always wanted a really big table because I got a big family, and I host a lot of stuff. I host a lot of dinners, and when I got it, I had one before, and it was super cool, like made from 100-year-old Indonesian bridge. And I found it before I had a house to put it in. And because we were looking, previously I was looking for a house with the kid's dad, and I'm like, I found this 10-foot table, And we had been looking. He's like, we haven't even found a house that will fit a 10-foot table. I'm like, the Lord is going to give me a house that will fit a 10-foot table. And I just knew it. And so we bought it because it was a good deal, put it in storage. Voila, I had a house that fit it. So in the divorce process, I did not ask for the table because he got the house. And I'm like, I may never get married again. I may live in a tiny little farm home, like on some land, like who knows what direction my life is going to go, but it may not hold a house that fits a 10-foot table. So, of course, then I got remarried and we've been looking for a house, and we've been praying for a place that will fit our expanding family and all of our events that I like to do. And again, I told TJ, a couple years ago, I'm like, before I had prayed for a 10-foot table, and it was before we got a house, and the Lord gave it to me. And I'm like, just so you know, prepare yourself. I'm praying again for a big table. And this table could come in a lot of different ways. I could find a 10-foot table. I could find one just like I had before, or in my process when I first became single, I found a table just like the one I had, because there was a store in town who got stuff from like overseas, but it was a 6.5 foot. And so I'm like, this is perfect. This is my size. And so I had bought it and I had that table. And so I'm like, they sold a lot more of those tables than the 10-foot ones. And so I have had the measurements written down in my phone for like 2 years. So if I ever was like at a sale or a consignment shop and I saw a table just like mine, I could get it. And then when we find our house that's going to have an open floor plan to fit a big table, I can put those two tables together. And then it's actually 12 foot. So, or 13. Or I could put them side by side and they'd be matching. So anyways, so like I said, 2 years. 2 years praying and looking here and there. And one popped up on Facebook Marketplace. And I told TJ, I'm like, oh my gosh, my table, like the thing I've been praying for, it came up. And they wanted a lot for it. But I'm like, it's what I've been praying for. And I presented it to him. He's like, that is really not what I want to spend money on right now, because we are coming into like the expensive season of November and December, Christmas. And I'm like, okay. And in my mind, one of the things the Lord has been teaching me this year, and he's taught it to me before, like he's given me this message before, if you guys remember, when I was looking for a house, when I was single, and the Lord told me, when you need it, you'll have it. And so anyways, he was like, I don't really want to spend the money on that right now. I'm like, I get it. And I was okay with it, because I'm like, the Lord is teaching me, when I need it, I'll have it. So I might not have it now, but it will be there when I need it. Because like right now I don't need it, Well, anyways, long story short, he ended up getting it for me. And so there was a situation. He's like, so I've been talking to the lady with the table, and I'm like, what? I'm just crying all day, for a whole day. I was just crying. I just break up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, how important that was to me. So this year has felt like restoration. And I know that table thing seems like a small thing, but in my mind, that was kind of a big thing because of what it represented. We had so many good times around the table. It represented family. It represented good times and food, which I love to cook, and friends and all this stuff. Showers and all of those things. So, and if you guys remember my last video, I had a really hard 2 months this year. what I would say the hardest 2 months I've had since I was single. And, in the hard single days. So even in the midst of some difficult times, what a year of restoration. I would have never guessed going into this year that God would be restoring so much. And, TJ is like, everything in your life is like the Bible verse that says, oh my gosh, why did it leave me right now? Probably because I'm right here. He restored the years the locust ate, something like that. Everything has been restored, save a house that we've been praying for. And some cool things have happened with that, as far as like not a house, but if you guys remember my last video, we had a contract on our house. It fell through. I was super confused, like, why did this even happen? I packed more stuff up. One of the issues was it not having a roof, like the roof was old. Everyone in our neighborhood has a new roof because evidently hail has destroyed all the roofs, but everyone has said we couldn't get a roof. And if we had had a roof, then that contract would have gone through. And even though we had a little bit of time to look for a house, in retrospect, nothing came up that would have worked for us. And so I feel like that was, again, one of the things that the Lord has been teaching me this year is his timing. I read the Bible in a year this past year with the Bible recap. It goes chronologically. It's with Tara Lee Cobble, and it was excellent. And if you need a Bible reading program, I would highly, highly, highly recommend that one, because it is a different perspective of the word and of the happenings of scripture when you read it chronologically. I'm not talking about like Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, chronologically as far as when things happen. So you'll read some in Genesis and then you flip to Job and then you go back to Genesis and stuff like that. One of the things the Lord taught me this year in that was his timing, and essentially through that, his providence, his sovereignty. And so I look at this like we've been praying for a house and like it could have gone through. And all these people have looked at our roof and is like, no, I don't think we can turn this into the insurance. And then a random guy comes at the end of December and is like, hey, I think you have some hail damage. We're like, oh, yeah, we've had like 12 people look at it and they said no. He goes up and looks. He says, yes. Insurance guy comes. He's like, yeah, you get a new roof. So if you hear noise right now, that's them. They're putting a new roof on and gutters. So, I feel like I can trust God in his timing. Coming through that hard 2 months this past year, I just like everything's open-handed. I'm not clutching onto stuff like, God, I'm like believing for this. Like, don't you know we've been praying? No, it's like open hands, God's timing, God's sovereignty. He knows what's best, because in the scope of things, we don't know what tomorrow brings. We don't know what things are going to look like in 2 years, but God does, because he is outside of time. It's like we have to watch. It's like if you think about looking at a parade, and we have to look at the first float, and then we have to look at the second float, and it's just in time like this. But God, when you don't have the dimension of time, it's like it's like he's from the sky and he can look down and see the whole parade all at once. And that was an example that helped me understand, how is it God is not in the time zone? Like, I know it, but like, what does that mean? What does it look like? And that was a good visual for me. So trusting that God, a good father, who leads us and guides us, the good shepherd, he can be trusted. So that was one thing I learned this year through reading the Bible chronologically. And then for this next year, as I said at the beginning, this year might be a little wild. There's some things in the works that my husband TJ and I have been praying about. One thing that we started this year is we started fasting together, fasting and praying together once a week. There's power in prayer. There's power in two people coming together of one mind, of one accord, praying on specific things. And so some things happened earlier this year. So for the last 6 months, once a week, we've been fasting. We get up early in the morning. We pray for an hour and throughout the day. And this year, beginning of this year, we did some more long-term, like fasting and prayer together. Because as Christians, if you think of who was the first family who got to hear the gospel after, Jesus rose from the dead, he's like, preach the gospel. It's just been with the Jews. And the first person to hear is, was it Cornelius? They come to Peter. Remember, Peter had the vision, and then he goes and the Lord's like, the vision is like, go preach. Like everyone can hear it. Everyone can hear the gospel. He goes and talks to them. And it said one thing about Cornelius and his family, or Cornelius himself, the characteristics that were talked about from being someone who loved God, who sought God, was he was a man who prayed. He was a man who fasted. He lived a holy life, and he remembered the poor in his giving. And so those are 4 characteristics that as Christians, we need to make sure that we are incorporating into our walk with God. I hate to fast. And the Bible says, you don't talk about fasting when you're fasting, like, oh, I'm fasting, but when the Bible talks about something that needs to be part of your life, it's good to talk about it, and to teach about it or to share about it. And so that's something that has surprisingly been something really impactful for my husband and I this past year. And we're like, even when we get the answer to the things that we are seeking the Lord on, we're like, this is amazing and powerful. We're just going to keep doing it. This once a week thing. And I would encourage anyone listening to do so too. It's really impactful for your spiritual walk. And then, so some of the things for this coming year, as I said, there's some things in the works that we're praying about, we've been fasting about, seeking the Lord, and though we're not sharing them right now, it's some things that might be some changes or will be some changes in our life coming up. So, and I think as part of the vision that God gave me, I shared on here about 1.5 years ago about a new path. God showed us a new path with like a golden gate that opened, and we were on this path, and we're like, what is this new path? Because nothing like a new path has come up. But anyways, stay tuned for later, to be announced or whatever. But this year, some of my intentions for creating life habits is, this last year, I used to always work out really early in the morning. And last year I was like, I'm gonna do the 9 a.m. class. I go to this gym and they have this class I like. I'm like, I want to do the 9 a.m. class. And what I've realized, like at the end of the year, I'm like looking at things, I'm like, why am I not accomplishing more in a day? And it's because if I don't work out till 9 and I'm done at 10, and then I gotta go home and shower and get ready, it's like, oh great, and I eat something, it's 11 o'clock. It's a great way to start the day, 11 o'clock in the morning. So I'm like, I'm gonna have to start waking up super early again. So I'm gonna start, and I've already started, doing my 5:30 workout again. I decided I want the kids, I want to provide better nourishment for my kids. So I have a plan to, a lot of times, like, we don't do breakfast. Like, I have granola, I have yogurt, I've got cereal, all that stuff. But I'm like, I want to make a concerted effort to do something different for breakfasts. So I'm going to do that. That's like on my list for healthy life habits that I want to instill. Install. Let's see. These are written down on my phone that I'm recording on. I'm going to continue reading the Bible through like I have been last year. It was so impactful. And I'm just doing another program. I'm actually going through the New Testament. I'm going to go through it 3 times this year instead of the whole Bible in 1 year. So that's one of the things I'm going to instill. I also have a list of books that I want to start going through. So those are just some of the things that I'm wanting to implement for this new year and create some habits around. And as I said before, one of my goals is to make a video once a month at least. So this is something that the Lord put on my heart years ago to start. Oh, my husband's home. Years ago to start. I felt like it was a journey or a journal, like an online journal, sharing the journey. And so I'm going to do a better job at that. So anyway, so these are some of the things for this new year. I'd love to hear some of the things that you guys are implementing, and stay tuned. I have some exciting stuff to share. I'm hoping to do a couple fun videos with my husband coming up on romance, and so it'll be perfect for February. So anyways, bless you guys. Thank you for dropping in and listening and hearing my updates and journey, and we'll see you soon. Thanks.